I'm probably going to do a sermon on that lover of leaving thing. I'm Reverend J. Wolin, the settled minister here at the Unitarian Universalist Church of Sarasota. So good to be with you here this morning. Especially want to welcome any visitors that we have here today, whether in person or online on our live stream. And we invite our visitors to participate in any of the events that happen at the church here. And if you'd like to get a weekly newsletter or other highlight announcements, you can go to our website and sign up. There's a link there to sign up, or right outside the door, there are a couple of people there at the welcome table that will be happy to sign you up. And if, what else? Oh, please join us for coffee and snacks after the service so we can all get to know each other better, because that is how relationships are built. And we look forward to getting to know you. And so today we have a couple of announcements. First is the auction. First one was Scott Rubin.
Good morning. You're awake. I love that. Much better than the first service. You've already had your coffee and sugar and whatever. I'm Scott Rubin. I don't always wear beads, but when I do, it's because of the auction. And I've been asked to run through a few things you need to know before the auction. So let's get ready to auction. Yes, the auction is this Saturday, February 4th, from noon to about 3 o'clock. There are some important dates. First, you need a ticket. Tickets are only $10. That's to cover the cost of the amazing lunch we're having. Today is the last day to buy tickets. That way we're sure we have enough food for everybody. The ticket also has your bidder number on it, so please bring it with you on Saturday. If you donated a physical item, like tickets for a show or a piece of artwork, please bring it to the church this Friday. I'll repeat that, this Friday between noon and 3 o'clock. We want to make sure we have all of those things on hand where they belong when the doors open on Saturday. If you can't be here on Friday to drop off your item, please see someone at the auction table after the service to make arrangements. When do you get the catalog? Today. Some of you have it already. If you do, please tuck it under your seat so you can fully focus on the service. If you don't have one yet, please pick one up after the service. About that catalog, please review it carefully. There are more than 130 items because your generosity is amazing. And I heard a wow. That's absolutely. We were blown away by that. So you want to review it so you know what you're bidding on when you get here on Saturday. And it's especially important to read the bidding instructions. I'll highlight just a few things. This year we're having a live auction for 5 items. They're listed on the last 2 pages of the catalog, so make sure you don't miss those. Some items have more than one available, like 6 seats for a dinner. If you want, for example, 2 seats, you'll need to bid twice. You write your bidder number and your bid twice on the bid sheet. And it's also important to pay attention to the date an event will take place. Not every event has a date, but some do. So if you're bidding, make sure you're available on that date. We'll do our best to identify the winners of tangible items within about 30 minutes after the auction closes, so you can pick up the items you won on Saturday. All winners will be notified of their winnings and receive an invoice within a few days after the auction. Finally, one last instruction. Have fun. Join us on Saturday to celebrate indulge, and let loose.
I have one other announcement I would like to make. On February 10th in the evening and Saturday the 11th during the day, we're having a very special workshop here, a culture of inclusion. This is one of the 3 board goals this year, was to create educational programs around diversity, equity, and inclusion. And our racial justice coordinating team has been hard at work creating this. This workshop is for all members and friends to introduce strategies for working towards long-term cultural change in our church and how to engage the congregation in the process. Teaching the class is Paula Cole-Jones, someone who I personally have taken training with a number of times over the years, and she makes the information very accessible, and really she works really hard to help people understand and help to educate people. She is the founder of the Eighth Principle Movement and gave the fall lecture at General Assembly, which is a big thing at General Assembly, on community of communities, which I think, as you'll even hear in the sermon today, is I think what we are hoping to potentially strive for. So without any further ado and enough announcements, it is my pleasure, and I got to hear this the whole first service, so I get to enjoy it again, to introduce Jane Hoffman, who's a principal flutist for the Pops Orchestra, joining us today. Let's give a hand for Jane. Our opening reading is from the Reverend Richard Gilbert. We meet on holy ground. We meet on holy ground, for that place is holy where we meet each other, where lives touch, where love moves, where hope stirs. How strong is our need for one another, our silent beckoning to our neighbors, our invitations to share life and death together, our welcome into the lives of those we meet, and their welcome into ours. We kindle our chalice, a symbol of light reflecting that eternal light which shines always around and before us. So please now join me in saying the words of affirmation, which are printed in your order of service and on the screen above me. As we light this chalice, the symbol of Unitarian Universalism, we affirm our third principle, the acceptance of one another and encouragement to spiritual growth in our congregations.
Today's story, The Cool Bean by Jory John and Pete Oswald. Watch out! Here come the cool beans. The cool beans, oh yeah. Check out how they move. Look at the way they swagger and notice their sunglasses. Yow! The cool beans are known all over school, from house to house, and across town beyond county lines. In the olden days, last year, we were all one big pot of beans. We were a mixed bag, but somehow we made it work. Yep, those were the good old days. And then we stopped seeing each other as much. No, that's just how it is sometimes. You spend less time together even though you're not totally sure why. I watched as the beans I knew so well, the beans from my very own pod, they became the cool beans. Oh, they were so cool. One of them could play guitar, cool. One of them could draw the best superheroes, cool. One of them could jump higher than any bean I have ever known, super cool. Me? Well, I mostly stayed the same. Sure, I made some small changes. I wore sunglasses. I slicked back my hair. I swaggered. I strutted around. But I was still picked last for everything. My clothes never seemed to fit. I snorted when I laughed, and I walked into stuff. I was an uncool bean for sure. I started thinking of myself as just a common bean with no special skills. I couldn't compete, so I didn't even try. I'd never be a cool bean. And it seemed like there were two types of beans in the world. There were the cool beans, and then beans like me. The days all blended together. I lived my life and things were just okay. I took tests and I ate lunches and I mostly kept to myself. The cool beans continued being cool. I mean, sure, I missed them. I did, but it's not like I'm going to say anything. I felt like all that coolness had just gotten into the way of our friendship. And that's how it went, until one day, I was in the cafeteria and I dropped my lunch on my loafers. But then something sort of miraculous happened. Out of nowhere, one of the cool beans helped me clean it up. He didn't even say anything. He just gave me a nod. That was it. Later, I was out on the playground and I tripped and scraped my knee and I maybe cried a little bit and everybody saw it. But one of the cool beans came to my side and without a word, he dusted me off. That afternoon, I was sitting in class. I wasn't really paying attention and I didn't notice, but our teacher had called on me. Everybody stared. I sat there in silence. Nobody said anything. And then everybody just laughed at me. That was it. After today, I was officially a has-been. But then one of the cool beans stood up and came over to me. Everybody watched. She leaned in close and whispered, "Hey, the teacher asked you to read from page 32. Then she gave me a quick wink and went back to her seat. It was a small gesture, yes, but it was also everything. I walked home with a goofy smile on my face. I smiled all the way through dinner. That day made all the difference. It was a day that could have been really bad if not for the kindness of a few cool beans. It gave me a shred of confidence. That shred of confidence has continued to grow. Somebody had my back, or a few somebodies. And after that, I started hanging out with the cool beans again. Not all the time, but sometimes. And at lunch, after school, and even on the weekends. And throughout all of this, I realized that it's not about how you look or any of that other stuff. It's about a wink or a nod or a smile just at the right moment. It's about dusting somebody off, helping them up again, and pointing them in the right direction. Do you need a hand? Yes, please. Now, that's cool. So while this story focuses on the social anxiety of developing friendships and how being accepted by our peers, or not, impacts our self-esteem, it also reminded me of a childhood instruction. You must be friends with everyone, but can you really? Can you invite all those people? Think about all the people that you know at school or work or church. It may be in the hundreds. To invite them all to your birthday would be a big bash. Perhaps we should teach our children that we should be friendly with all the people, but having deeper friendships with fewer people, like the Beans Pod buddies, is part of what keeps us balanced in life. Friends are those who you can share your innermost thoughts and emotions without judgment, who can, without fear, call you out when you mess up, and who you can call on when life gets tough, knowing that they will be there. Friends keep us centered. Thank you. I invite all of our younger UUs to join me in the back as we talk more about friendship. Thank you.
want to believe, we can ignore it. Just turn off the TV and try to insulate ourselves from the seemingly ongoing tragedies in the world, one after another. But that is not our way. We do not cling to the illusion of the separateness of humanity. Everyone who suffers is our sibling. It is our religious duty to work to reduce violence in our heart and in the world, to work to instill more love in our heart and in the world, to build up those empathetic muscles, to not look away, but to face the suffering in the world and to work to reduce suffering for all people. This is our way. So I ask you today, in light of that, to remember the suffering that is in the world, and particularly to remember the suffering of Tyree Nichols and his family, Tyree who was murdered by Memphis police. And so to keep his death in our memories, I ask you to say his name, Tyree Nichols. Say his name, Tyree Nichols. One more time, Tyree Nichols. May his family find some comfort knowing that there are others in the world who will work to prevent the next person from needlessly dying, wherever it may be, including Sarasota. As we take a moment of silence, let us look inward to contemplate where our heart is today.
Good morning. I'm Ed Loomis, and I want to talk to you this morning about our small group ministry, which consists of Chalice Groups and Journey Circles. And I've been a member of both. They both have pretty much the same goal, but get there in quite different ways. And I've been a facilitator in both. And one of the advantages of speaking twice the same morning is you can correct the things you said wrong the first time. Now, I've been a Unitarian Universalist for 25 years, and this morning I said that I've been a member of 7 congregations, including this one, and none of them had a small group ministry. During coffee hour, I was informed by a longtime member of the Rockford, Illinois church that I was their summer ministry at one time, and they did have a small group ministry program. So I was in 8 churches, and one of them did have a program. So that shows one of the things that happens, that even the minister might not know a church has a program. There's so much behind the scenes. So today, we're letting you know we have one and inviting you to join us. And I was briefly in a small group ministry program in seminary. One of the classes asked us to divide into 3 groups and to create a small group ministry program. And we were given the directions on how to create a successful small group ministry program. And being seminary students, we did not need directions on how to do that. And our group became disorganized and ceased to function after the 2nd session. Now, shortly after I got here at this church, I was asked by a Chalice Group facilitator to join one of the groups. And I was hesitant because I have a mild or significant hearing loss, and my seminary experience with groups was not a good one. And a primary function of a Chalice group is to work on deep or close listening with someone who's speaking. And I wasn't sure if I could do that, but based on what I learned about this congregation's well-run program and the fact that it would be a good way to meet people in the congregation on a more personal level, I overrode all my qualms and joined a group. Now, I tend to be an introvert with a significant hearing loss, so I'm often reluctant to talk to strangers. But the 2nd session of our group, we created a covenant, and that covenant consisted of an agreement that we would not interrupt each other when we were talking. We would not comment on what someone else said. We would pay attention to what someone said. And the one exception was if someone could not hear, or someone spoke too fast or too slow, too fast or too softly, you could interrupt, just ask them to speak louder or more slowly. Now, so in that group setting, in the covenant setting, I also talked with the group and created another sort of promise, and that was that I have a hearing loss, so I may ask you to speak up, repeat something, speak louder, and slow down. And I, in return, will not interrupt you and ask for that aid unless I cannot follow this conversation without it. And that worked very well for me in the group. And I really enjoyed it in the group because I was able to create a covenant with them on how I could interact with them in a safe manner. And the group setting was, our covenant made me feel more comfortable explaining my hearing problem and asking them to be more patient with me. So it created a safe and sacred space where I could share. And one of the best aspects of the group was meeting new people. Many people have become friends from being in the group, and there are probably 6 or 7 now who I can consider friends. It also gives me someone who I can comfortably communicate with during a social event such as coffee hour. And one of the best aspects of the group was simply meeting new people. And I found that one of the things I enjoyed the most was my meeting new people on a more intimate level and watching other people do the same. Thank you.
I'm thinking we need a railing here. I'm Linda Billings. Good morning. And I am facilitating a Chalice Group based out of this church. We meet twice a month on Monday evenings at my home. I first learned about Chalice Groups, or covenant groups, as some UUs call them, in the early 1990s when we started them at my UU church in Arlington, Virginia. Our congregation had grown to about 600 members, and our minister decided that small group ministry would be a way to enable members to make it possible for shy and single people like me to make connections. It took a while for me to do it, but eventually I took on the job of facilitator of a covenant group. We met at my home in the evening monthly. The group stayed together for 15 years. And we had a few members come and go, but a core group stayed together for that 15 years. I so enjoyed my experience in this group that a year or two after we started it, I agreed to start and facilitate a second group. This group stayed together for some years, with members taking turns facilitating and hosting in each other's homes. We celebrated the birth of 2 children and also 2 weddings. Some of the members kept together after I relocated to Sarasota, and a few of us are still in touch by Zoom. I came to Sarasota as a lone UU in 2017. My previous and current partners were not interested in engaging in church, but I was. I joined a Chalice group my first year in Sarasota. Ed Loomis was in the group too. And later I became facilitator of a new group, the one that meets twice a month on Monday evenings. We use Soul Matters topics to guide our discussions. I cannot begin to tell you how meaningful these groups in Virginia and in Sarasota have been in my life. In the turbulent and stressful world we live in, they provide sanctuary, solace, and inspiration. They have aided me in my efforts to live the 4th principle, a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. For me, these groups are an opportunity to think deeply, to listen deeply, and to make intimate connections with other people. We may or may not socialize outside the group, but when we do meet as a group, we are close. We are a beloved community within the larger UU community, for which I am deeply grateful. In these groups, we can and do talk about how transitions and other stressful events affect us. We talk about social, ethical, and philosophical issues that are pressing upon us, and we listen to each other deeply and respectfully. As the UU Association says, small groups are great places to get to know other people and to get to know yourself. Over time, we can build deep connections with one another in these groups and with the larger congregation. And Linda Bodycomb has asked me to let you all know that the group that she facilitates has an opening for 1 male member. And that may not be in the spirit of inclusion that we talk about, but she can explain to you why they're looking for a male member. Thank you very much.
I can tell you right now, we need one more guy to join the other guy that's in our group, and everybody else is a woman. So we want him to have some company. Okay, my name is Linda Bodycomb, and I'm your liaison to the Unitarian Universalist Service Committee. Every month, we share the plate with a charity, and this month, it happens to be the UU Service Committee. I love talking about this organization, which is a sister to the UU Association. They've been doing great social justice work, both in the US and abroad, for many, many years. Their work changes with the changing needs of the world. For instance, they are now focusing on environmental justice and climate change mitigation in places where residents are facing displacement due to rising seas. I learned just yesterday that they are securing resources needed by the Pacific Islanders to remain in their ancestral homes. And if you had to leave your home during the hurricane, you can certainly understand how hard that would be for these people. They are distributing humanitarian aid and helping to rebuild in Ukraine, the Philippines, Haiti, Burma, and even here in the United States. They are funding educational programs about and with indigenous peoples right here in Florida, since the tribes in the Everglades are dealing with encroachment of developers and pollution. These are just a few examples. Their work spans every continent in the world. Usually we have a service committee membership drive during the month of January, but this year we plan to do it in early April. However, if you're used to renewing your membership during January and wish to continue that tradition, you can do so by going to the weekly contact, and there's a button there that says donate, and you can donate through there. Or you can go directly to the service committee's website at www.uusc.org. $40 will enroll your family as members, and $150 will be matched by the Shelter Rock congregation on Long Island. Make sure you include UU Sarasota as your congregation so that we can keep up with our membership statistics. And you can always contact me if you have questions. We're going to skip the short video for timing. So now I hope that you are inspired to be as generous as you can when we pass the plate, and remember to put in some money for the service committee. If you're making a check out for the service committee, make it out to the church with UUSC in the memo line. For those of you at home or those that donate through their phones, you can donate by clicking that button on our website. Thank you so much for your support, and let this sacred time begin.
into a very meditative state listening to that. Our reading is from the UU theologian Tandeka. Small groups practice right relationship, and as such are the people's work. There are Unitarian Universalists' sacramental act. There are small group ministries for the human heart. The individuals gather together and are gathered together as a liturgical act. The collective power of this act of right relationship calls each and all of us forth as individuals to testify, to tell our stories, and to engage in community work. Each testimony is a sacramental act. And because it is a movement of the human heart, we know this sacred space as the healing and transformational power of life itself. We are transformed by this act into a religious people, a people whose purposes and principle explain this liturgical, sacramental act of right relationship. And now, once more, Jane Hoffman. you. Thank you, Jane, for blessing us with your gifts today. So when I was a young boy, we lived in a very tight-knit community. I know people think of New York City as wide and sprawling, which it is, but the neighborhood I lived in was very tight-knit. We knew almost every neighbor on our block, and all the store owners in the neighborhood lived in the neighborhood. And that may seem like an old-fashioned story these days, and I think it is, but that situation had both positive and negative aspects to it. So, you know, if I did something wrong in the neighborhood, my parents would know about it almost immediately. That happened, unfortunately, more often than I'd like to admit. But as well, if I needed help, I could count on most of my neighbors to help me as well. How we create community, however, has changed over time. Sometimes for the better, sometimes not. When my son and his family lived with us, they would play video games with people all over the world. And they would talk to the same people every night. You know, they'd chat through the video game machine, and they created their own community in that way. We also have Facebook and other social media, despite all its faults, allows us to stay connected to people we care about all over the country and all over the world. And in the past, I would say our choices were often forced upon us, right? Sometimes due to geography or our work or our birth religion. But now we have new choices to face because we have relocated far from where we were raised, because we were not accepted for a myriad of reasons by the community we belonged to, because opportunities were not available for us to grow and thrive, because weather or physical conditions made it necessary to leave. Most of us have left the communities that we grew up in or built over time, including our religious communities, whether by necessity, opportunity, or choice. We now have a greater ability to be more transitory. And when we make a life change, we seek out new communities. And we here have chosen Unitarian Universalism as our religion, or we are contemplating that if we are just visiting here. And even for those who are born Unitarian Universalists, at some point they come to a place in their life if they have to reflect upon whether this religion is the one that they want to continue to practice. There are many reasons people join this religion. Some come for comfort, others come to be inspired, some come to raise their children in an open religious environment, others for our values on justice, but ultimately I believe most people come to find a connection, to be part of a meaning-making community. And I imagine the primary challenge for visitors and new members is gaining that connection, especially in a church this size. Especially if you're an introvert, it can be difficult to connect. And you know, I don't know why this is, but and this is purely anecdotal, but many Unitarian Universalists I find are introverts. And I'm not going to ask you to raise your hand because that would embarrass the introverts that are here. But it's true. Even I am an introvert, but over the years I've just learned to express myself a lot. And I certainly do that a lot. But how we create those connections, and more importantly, how we can deepen these connections to be more meaningful in our lives is, I think, why we come together. Unitarian Universalist theologian James Luther Adams wrote, and I quote, "People come to churches for intimacy and ultimacy." Now, when I typed the word ultimacy into Microsoft Word, that red line appeared underneath it indicating a wrong spelling or an incorrect spelling. And when I right-clicked on it for correct spelling, it had no suggestions for me. So clearly a great mystery of the universe. And so, as I normally do, and I have something that I'm curious about, right? I do a little study and investigation, and I found this one Reverend John Morgan commenting on it said, and I quote, "People come into our communities looking for a place to belong and a place to seek meaning. And seek meaning about the living and the dying and the spaces in between." In Reverend Bob Hill's book, Small Group Ministry, Saving the World 10 at a Time, he writes, where he talks about two of his colleagues recollecting about deathbed statements they'd heard from congregants. In one case, the woman complained that what she had wanted from her church was the opportunity to talk with others about what mattered most to her, and she had never had that experience. The other situation also involved a statement of regret by someone about their church experience, and they said, "All I ever wanted to do was to talk with others about life's journeys." And I believe, this is where I believe Chalice Circles, small group ministry, are one way that we can help create an environment where one can find those deep, meaningful experiences. Now, there are many programs here that I would consider small groups, but this is one that's intentional to give us an opportunity to explore with a group of people those deep questions of life in an environment that is trusting and non-judgmental. As you heard before, they're a group of 6 to 10 people. They commit to get together for an agreed amount of time. They either facilitate or co-facilitate. And by the way, if you've facilitated in a previous congregation or have experience facilitating, let us know. We're always looking for new facilitators. Actually, we have more people than we have facilitators for. And we are always looking for, anyway, I said that. Anyway, so part of the process is sort of checking in, see where our lives have been since we last met, and that is part of that relational building. And then there's a question posed, maybe a reading and a question posed, and then each person shares from their own experience in response to the topic. And these are not groups to debate a topic, but an opportunity to share and listen to each other's ideas and experience. And this helps us widen the lens with which we can see the world through other perspectives. Or I'll tell you an interesting story. When I was in Iowa, I had no idea what it was like to grow up on a farm and the experience of living in rural farm country. And they, in turn, had no experience of what it was like to grow up in an inner city. And so that's just one simple example of how different lenses that people have, or somebody with a lens who grew up as a person of color versus a white person. And they have a different lens on which they view the world often. And so all of these discussions are what deepen this meaningful connection that we create with others in the group. And we are creating a circle. There's a reason we call it Chalice Circles. We are creating a circle where all are welcome, a circle where all can share and be heard, and a circle where all are loved. The circle, a symbol of unity. Right? Think about a ring, right? Like a wedding ring, right? It's a symbol of unity. I better not drop that. In which our lives are joined together. And wherever we are, we know we are a part of something special. These circles help create the greatest circle of our church community, which becomes our touchstone, our home base, our place of safety. It is through building these connections that we build the beloved community. It is through these connections where we realize our shared values and religious beliefs. And what I personally found truly beneficial about these Chalice Circles is the variety of connections that we created. Connections with people I might not otherwise have met. A quick example, when I first found this religion, I was young, I had young children, so I mostly hung out with parents and other religious education teachers. And there was always this one woman in the front of the church, older lady, much older lady than I was, and she always wore this fancy hat. I always wondered, like, why is she always wearing these stylish hats? But, you know, at that time in my life, I was not the kind of person who would just walk up to somebody and say, why are you wearing that hat? You know, and so it turned out the two of us ended up in a connection circle together, and we actually became very close friends despite our age difference, and both of our lives were enriched knowing each other. And I found out about the hat. And so, you know, I learned something new about somebody that I might not have otherwise known. I saw a new way of looking at things by meeting people that were different than me. I also learned that in Microsoft Word, if you right-click on a word that has that red line underneath it, you just right-click on it, and then you can just click on it, and you can add it to your dictionary. And so now the word ultimacy is in my Microsoft dictionary. And just as easily as I can add a word into my dictionary, you too can add meaningful experiences into your lives. We are often so busy, right? There's never time to just stop and think about these big issues in life, right? But therefore, the intimacy and ultimacy requires participation, intentional participation. And if we are not intentional in our lives, the winds will just sweep us where they may. So I invite you to show up, to add to your religious and spiritual journey. I come share your life journey with others here, and to seek meaning through Chalice circles or other small groups at the church. Come, whoever you are. Come, yet again, come. May it be so. And now I invite you to show up and sing and dance and clap for our closing hymn, number 1021, Lean on Me. And that seems as good a benediction as I think we need, so let us Well, it's already extinguished, but we have that light in our heart. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Thank you all for your presence here today. Thank you. And there is people outside to sign you up to join a Chalice group if you're interested.